All right, well, this is my favorite time of the evening where I get to sit back, relax, and just enjoy proceedings. So this is when we've got a guest expert to come and share with us their knowledge and some of their in a particular field that they have experience in. So tonight it is my great pleasure to introduce you to a friend of mine. It's Matt White. Matt is an accountant. Don't let that put you off. He is an accountant that has a good sense of humour and a lot of personality as well too. So he's an interesting character, and one of the things that he has a great deal of interest in is government grants and tax incentives. And he'll often advise other accountants in this area as well as clients and people that come to him to find out a bit more about it. Some of these grants and things that you'll find out tonight, you won't have heard of before. He's going to give you some information that will be new information and will really help you in business if you're looking for additional funding for things like research, development, export, and a whole host and range of things. Just to share a quick little story, I do know of a business owner on the Gold Coast. She runs an online art course. She applied for one of these grants and she got about $70,000 as an export grant. Bearing in mind, she's an online business, purely online business. She was selling into the US. She got an export grant for $70,000. She put that towards her marketing, which is essentially Facebook ads. And she spends about $500,000 a year on Facebook ads, which sounds like a lot of money, really, doesn't it? But her turnover in the previous year was $2 million. So she spent $500,000, the $70,000 grant got her going to spend that. She brought in $2 million. She obviously doesn't keep all that. You know, she got $500,000 after the ad spend. So she's probably got another 30% there that was used for expenses and those type of things as well. But you know, she probably walked away with around about $1,000 to $1 million in her pocket after the end of all that there. So not too bad for a part-time business, all online. So Matt won't tell you how to do art, but he will tell you how to apply for some of these grants and some of the things that you need to look at and have a look through. So let's put your hands together and welcome along to the screen here today, Matt White.
Thank you, Nick, and thanks everyone for inviting me. Thank you, Nick, for inviting me to be along, and thanks everyone for coming along and listening to me and taking time away from your business and family, etc. As Nick introduced me, my name is Matt White. I'm a chartered accountant from MJW Advisory. We're a full-service tax accounting and advisory firm based on the Gold Coast and Brisbane, but I'm also the founder of RD Tax and Grants, a specialist research and development tax incentive and government grants practice that assists IP-rich, high-growth companies access R&D, commercialisation, growth and export funding via the various programs I'm just about to present. Did mention at the outset that I'm happy to take questions along the way because not everyone in the room is going to resonate with exactly what I've got to say, but at the same time too, I'm sure I could add value to your particular business size and type and your particular industry. Perhaps I might ask Nick if you could help me, please. If they put the questions into chat, I might need someone to just warn me, but I'm certainly happy if you just unmute yourself and jump in as well. So I'll go ahead if that's okay. So I guess most importantly to understand that, you know, there are thousands of grants available in Australia, particularly across all levels of government, from local city council to state government to federal government. But then even beyond that, so for example, industry associations, you know, many casinos and other benevolent organisations, not that I'm saying a casino is a benevolent organisation, but they'll also have pockets of funding available for all different types of things. They could be not-for-profit. There could be grants available for, you know, individuals, elderly, students, housing, emergency and disaster recovery, subsidies, government loans, all of those sorts of things. They're not necessarily my area of expertise and not what I want to focus on today. I want to talk about more specifically what are available to business. But certainly there are heaps available local, state, federal, and then beyond that, government-owned organisations, not-for-profits, industry associations, etc., will also have grant funding available. Invariably, however, those that apply to business fall within two major categories. The first being eligibility or entitlement-based categories, and the second category being competitive or merit-based categories. So I'll go through and talk about what that means. Once again, you're welcome to raise your hand or just jump off mute and have any questions if you would like. I'll go through first and talk about what an entitlement-based grant is. Now, entitlements are often available, and whilst I'm only going to talk about business grants today, they are often available for taxpayers or Australian tax residents or Australian residents of different shapes and sizes. And invariably, they're based on eligibility. And from a business perspective, it's eligibility of business type and structure, eligibility, of certain expenditure that a business is about to invest in, and then also certain business activity. These are also often reimbursement type programs where monies are provided retrospectively to spending the money and undertaking the eligible activity. Nick has already made mention, and many of you may well also have heard of the two most common types of eligibility or entitlement-based programs, being the Research and Development Tax Incentive and the Export Market Development Grant. Now, these are two of the federal government principal programs that are available for businesses across all industries, so they're not industry specific. From time to time, these programs get tweaked or changed or what have you, but invariably these two programs have been available for business for 30 plus years. So whilst they change, they really get reincarnated, but they've been around a long time. I'm not going to go into too much detail on any of them tonight, but I will talk a little bit about each of these because they may be topical. The Research and Development Tax Incentive, for example, is available for businesses that get involved in innovation and research and development. Now, what that means in a business context will differ industry to industry, but needless to say, most industries that are developing a thing are typically eligible to receive these if they are, in fact, undertaking eligible activities. The only industry that may be precluded from that is building and construction. In saying that, where we are developing a methodology or an innovation within these industries, I've certainly seen these industries make claims before. Why it's quite concessionary, particularly for startups or entities in a loss-making capacity, is it's reimbursable to the tune of 43.5 cents on the dollar. So you can appreciate that, you know, of $1 million spend or something like that. I'll keep it in nice round numbers for me. 43.5 cents on the dollar is quite concessionary. Of course, you might lose your losses, or your tax losses won't be available to carry forward. To the extent that you're receiving a tax incentive, you're not paying tax or receiving franking credits, but certainly those in the startup phase or those that are in an industry that constantly develop, you can understand how 43.5 cents on the dollar is the incentive that Australia, or the Australian government rather, make available to encourage innovation in across all industries. I will say that whilst it's an entitlement based, there is a fairly high compliance and strict criteria around record keeping, documentation, all of those sorts of stuff. And it's probably, if I can soften it down to making a motor vehicle claim in your individual tax return, you know, sometimes the ATO will arbitrarily pay out your motor vehicle expense, and we think we're home and hosed, and then 12 months, 18 months, 2 years later, they come knocking on the door and they say, please explain, please show evidence of the motor vehicle expense claim. So if you are getting into R&D tax incentives, I won't go deep this evening. Perhaps there might be an opportunity for me to do a more detailed explanation of that in the future. But if you are getting involved in some of these entitlement-based, particularly R&D tax incentives, and you are receiving refundable credits, make sure you're over the compliance requirement, because there are plenty of people that receive refunds from the ATO and then subsequently get a tap on the shoulder and have to pay them back. Why do they fail? Largely because evidence and documentation around why you're eligible, and the onus is on you to be able to show cause as to why you're eligible to receive these. And then sometimes too, by the way, we're probably, well, not we, but some applicants are possibly claiming business as usual expenses, and these programs aren't available for business as usual expenses. They are only available for those that fit the criteria of what is research and development. So make sure you do your homework. The next entitlement-based program, as Nick has mentioned, is the Export Market Development Grant. It's known as the EMDG program. Once again, it's been around for decades. It gets a recut, it gets additional funding, it gets funding pooled. The types of expenses that can be eligible for that change from time to time. But invariably, it's sort of maintained the same shape or form for at least the last 10 or 15 years. Where it can be concessionary is it can take you from that R&D phase to actually commercializing your product in the market, and in more specifically, marketing and promoting your product overseas. So Nick made the, or explained the colleague of his that received the Export Market Development Grant for marketing and promoting her online business. Was that what it was, Nick? Her online business overseas. Certainly where we might spend a fortune on digital content, and that it can even be Australian-based digital content. So for all of those marketers and digital content creators out there, your fees potentially could be defrayed or reimbursed to your clients to the extent that the content that you're helping them create is disseminated overseas. So Google Ads, Facebook AdWords, all of those sorts of things. One of the other areas, however, it's quite concessionary and paying, is where we might put an overseas representative into a new market with the intention of them trying to build and develop that market. So for example, you might decide that the UK is your next market beyond Australia, and after some trade shows and a little bit of investigation, you decide that you want to invest in an overseas representative or an employee in that market. So to the extent that they're marketing and promoting, because it's not unusual to have one person wear multiple hats. If they're 100% engaged in business development for you in that territory, well, therefore then their salary and wages and overhead costs, for example, would be reimbursable at 100%, where they might be involved in, for example, if in a tech instance, both marketing and development, and then also systems integration or non-marketing activities. It's simply an apportionment. Other types of expenses that it claims for you as well, and I can certainly make myself available after the discussion to provide some information as well. But other areas that this program would also help would also help reimburse the cost of trade shows, to the extent that we're attending trade shows, both domestically too, by the way, domestically and abroad, where if you are attending a trade show domestically, you need to be able to show a significant proportion of international business and attendees. But certainly when you're attending a trade show overseas to market and promote your product or service overseas, that would be eligible. As to traveling overseas to market and promote your product, you can market and promote to existing clients, certainly where we've got multiple products or updates of products, that would be the case. And then also it will reimburse the costs associated with training your clients or your distributor for example, in a different territory, how to use your product as well. So it's certainly been one of the biggest ones to help develop an export market. Now, I do need to say that all of these grant programs are subject to an amount of funding that's been allocated, and from time to time, they get more and more applicants. Needless to say, when the Australian dollar's low, there's more and more people that are exporting. The program had a bit of a facelift 12 months ago, and on the back of that facelift, there was a 400% oversubscription of people jumping into the Export Market Development Grant. And what applicants were finding was that their grants were actually trimmed or modulated, I believe is the word that the Australian Trade Commission used. And where they had hoped to have received 100% of their grant entitlement, they were paid out something as low as 30%. So from year to year, government entities are just the same as any other business. They have budget and budgetary constraints, and their reason behind only paying out grants at a certain percentage is just to make sure that it's equitably shared across all applicants. Fortunately, across those COVID years, though, the federal government kicked in more money, and many of our clients and many applicants received 100% of their funding. So the opportunity is to receive up to $150,000 a year under that program, should you be marketing and promoting eligible services and eligible products in an eligible manner. So that's an example of an entitlement-based program. So entitlement, once again, based on eligible business structure, eligible expenditure, eligible activity. Retrospectively, you will receive funding. That's different to some of the larger competitive-based or merit-based funding. And I'll talk through a couple of these now.
I just think just before you do, we do have a question there from Fred. Have you still got a question there, Fred?
Yeah, I was just interested when you're talking about the digital side, because I thought when you were talking about the export and marketing overseas, that it was really about physical product. So for example, I've got JV arrangements with a number of people overseas, and it was very interesting when you're talking about that there might be a way of spending advertising dollars over there and getting the Aussie government to refund that. Is that a practical alternative? Is that something we could actually do?
And certainly happy to have a more detailed discussion with you, Fred, offline. But fundamental to receiving an export grant is that you need to own or have beneficial ownership of what it is you're marketing and promoting overseas. So in a tech or a software environment, we used to sell, excuse me, please, widgets and boxes and all that sort of stuff. But in a digital or a software environment, we might license the use of our software overseas to either direct to clients, direct to market, or via distributors that we have overseas as well. What the government would like to see is that you're actually receiving a royalty or an ongoing license fee for the use of that client in the US, for example. And to the extent that you are returning, repatriating that export dollars, don't get me wrong, the government do want you to bring the money home that you earn eventually. To the extent that you are returning those export sales via a licensing fee or a royalty, the expenses that you incur in marketing and promoting that product, even if it's marketing and promoting on behalf of a reseller, can be reimbursable by the Export Market Development Grant. Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing, dude. You just lit my fire. Thanks.
No problems. Well, once again, Fred, happy to have a chat to you, mate. Moving on to what we call competitive-based grants. Now these are often best dressed at the ball type of programs, based on eligibility, based on addressing a merit criteria. Often they're harder to jump into, but they can certainly be more concessionary. Now, there are certainly smaller grants from $5,000 or $10,000 through to $20,000. I don't generally get involved in a lot of those ones. However, happy to have a chat to you as well. As I said at the outset, they're also local council competitive grants of amounts of $500, amounts of $1,000, amount for $2,000. And from time to time, there's a lot of stimulus grants as well, where, the Queensland state government in particular just had a round of funding. You may have mentioned it, Nick, at the beginning of the program, mate. And it was a $5,000 business boost grant. Often it's quite light on the detail, but they have a predetermined area where they want to spend the money. And in that particular grant, they wanted you to spend the money on upgrading your digital presence, so websites, etc., etc.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't get that.
A lot of people didn't get it. Look, once again, and I don't get involved in those. Why? I can't add a lot of value, to be honest with you guys. But at the same time, too, my comment is if you know that they're coming up, you've addressed the eligibility criteria. Competitive-based grants can be political. I'm not sure if there's any government employees online, but certainly when there is a stimulus, when there is an election, when there's a topical point, i.e. regional or education or agricultural, green or Indigenous areas, for example, government funding can be pushed towards these sorts of key funding areas.
A lot of people were on their computers, wanted to get on, but they couldn't get on. So by the time they did get on, they missed out on it.
Yeah, and that's a part of it as well. It's a part of, please don't assume an over-sophistication of government organisation, IT, infrastructure and capacity. That's one that there was plenty of complaints about. I was simply bringing to your attention that there are smaller grants out there, and if you can jump onto them, jump onto them, because they're also offered across New South Wales, Victoria, Northern Territory, Western Australia as well. And sometimes it is first come, first serve. I want to move forward, though, to talk about some of the larger grants. Coming back,
just a quick question while you mentioned that. Is
Sure.
there any way that you can get like a grant alert type thing? So if you know there are grants coming up in a local community or in the state or nationally or whatever, is there anything out there that
yeah, certainly,
tenders, there are tender alerts and stuff like that?
Yeah, and certainly, and tenders. Thank you, Prudent, to bring that up. So sometimes government tenders follow the same process as well, and often we're a bit scared that we're not going to meet the procurement requirement. But assessing a merit criteria for a competitive-based grant is often the same as addressing a procurement requirement for a government tender. There is a federal government website, and I'll share my screen if I've got the capacity at some stage soon too, Nick, just to show you where to go to get some of these grants. Look, invariably, and I may have said at the outset, I think Nick had some tech issues at the time, but I may have said when I started, there's no such thing as a free upfront cash grant for business as usual types of activities that don't get captured with those economic stimulus, business boost type of programs. They just don't exist. The government aren't going to provide incentive for you to do what they'd consider to be mainstream. However, if you are starting to do things like invest in the development of new technology, invest in infrastructure, where that infrastructure will have spillover effects broader than your business, meaning it will enable you to scale your revenue. It will enable you to employ more people. It will have broader regional or industry effects. These are the types of government programs that you should go searching for, or to talk to someone like me. So, for example, the Queensland government has just finalised or finished round 9 of their Ignite Ideas program. Now, their Ignite Ideas program in Queensland, I'll talk about some other state government grants in a moment. It really does have a tech flavour. My comment is read the merit criteria, but in my experience, if you're not in the immediate centre and you're upstream or downstream and servicing some of those priority sectors, or if you've got a really compelling story to tell, I'd be putting an application in, even if you don't fit square in the merit criteria. And the reason why I do that is sometimes, like that business boost grant that we spoke about before, they're oversubscribed, you know, so it's first in, first served. You're going to miss out, you're going to get in, you maybe not. But sometimes government also want to make sure that they spend their money as well. And they like talking about success stories. You know, that they like to be able to send the minister for whatever out there to say that we've supported a regional business. And a regional business too, by the way, can be anyone outside a metropolitan area. And some grant programs would consider the Gold Coast a regional area. Some government grants, just for Queensland, for example, would consider Townsville a regional area. But if you're living square in the middle of Townsville or the Gold Coast, you know, it's certainly not Roma and it's certainly not Hughenden. You know what I mean? So be a little bit aware of the language that they use. The state government one that has just finalised, the Ignite Ideas, had funding available at 2 levels, one of up to $100,000, one of up to $200,000. The big one, of course, is the federal government $1 million program. Now, I appreciate that I might be talking in sizes that are, you know, beyond some of the projects that some of us would be putting together. But I just wanted to acknowledge that there are some significant grants out there. If I've got the capacity to share my screen, it looks like I do. Gee, that's dangerous. Not letting me have control, mate.
It should be good down the bottom there.
Yeah, down the bottom there. But you know, where do we go to find these government grants? So here I am. I don't know where we're from, but here's the New South Wales government webpage. They're pretty handy these days. You know, I want to look for a grant for business, for example. Different categories. You know, so for example, we might be in business. We might be a regional area. At the moment, they're really pushing tourism and event operators. But invariably their algorithm or whatever their bot on their program will probably get you to a couple. You know, obviously disaster recovery at the moment is big, certainly given that, you know, half of New South Wales is still underwater. But just for an example, the Victorian state government website has those types of grants available too. And it's simply a matter of saying, you know, opening soon, opening, ongoing, closed. Sometimes I'll look at closed. Why? Because programs that are successful potentially get new rounds of funding. You know, once again, these are budgetary, they're political. You know, the Ignite Ideas program that we've just submitted in Queensland was round 9, which means it's been going on now for about 8 or 9 years. And I think it was only ever proposed to go on for 2 or 3 years. So anyway, moving forward, this is the Queensland government. It's got small business grants there as well. There is a business growth fund, which is for amounts of up to $50,000. This one will say that it's closed, but these are the ones, there you go. The last time closed was Thursday, the 30th of June, but we're only in July and it's likely to open again. So these were for businesses generally that might be looking to invest in upgrading their website to enable a e-merchant function, or update their marketing and promotion function to be able to expand. You know, it's too hard with the time that I've got to talk about every single industry and every type of grant that's available, but you can see that you know, even some of the smaller grants are quite concessionary, and whilst this one is closed, I'd still keep it on your radar because they open and close all the time. You know, grants are available in Western Australia. Grants are available at a federal level. So, you know, www.gov.co or something. But once again, I can share those relevant URLs if you'd like to catch up afterwards. One of the important areas too, though, is I don't know what industry you will work in, but I just wanted to acknowledge that, for example, AMGC is a quasi-government owned, forgive me guys, industry association. You know, there's probably about 100 industry associations across Australia as well. More recently, these guys threw $1 million to commercialise advanced manufacturing technologies. But I just wanted to bring reference to have a think about what industry you're in. have a think about what industry you are servicing, have a think about what industry upfield or upstream, downstream to the one that you currently sit in, because if not you, it could well be your client that could be entitled to receive a grant. The types of things that they may well fund, for example, they always like funding sometimes key management personnel. So where we might be quite a small business and, we need to be able to show that we've got a little bit more structure and experience across our board, certainly some of those commercialisation grants pay for that. Where we might be co-partnering with certain industries, and particularly CSIRO, if you're in a technology space, CSIRO and government grants are available for key partners to partner as well. So I spoke a little bit about tenders. Are there any specific questions about any small business grants or any state government grants, any export grants, anything that I've discussed? I've come pretty hard and fast on a summary fashion, but you guys will appreciate that I'm not quite sure yet who's in the room, and there's hundreds of them.
I have a question.
Sure, yes, please.
Who can you go to get tendering grant written out for you?
What state are you in, Anthony?
Queensland.
Queensland. I think you'll find, mate, if you jump on, so there would be people external to government that potentially could offer grant writing or tender advice. But if you jump on Queensland, sorry, I need to reshare my screen, mate.
Yeah, right.
As I said, it's dangerous when Nick gives me control to drive. But when you jump on each of the government, government grant, sorry, I'll start again.
Yeah,
Queensland government, state government and federal government websites are so much better than they used to be. So if you fish around on the Queensland state government, and then in particular, there's a tender portal as well. Often government will provide government grant and tender writing services, and have tidbits and hints as to how to best place yourself for tenders and government grants. So that'll be a free service, and it'll be offered by both New South Wales, Victorian, Queensland, Western Australia, Northern Territory, federal government agencies. As to a lot of city councils would also offer that as well. So, for example, out here in the Moreton area, which is the area north of Brisbane up to the Sunshine Coast, they offer government grant and tender writing assistance as well. So you don't need to come through a government grant writer. It's all available for you. It's just about finding it. But if you jump on, for example, Moreton Bay Regional Council or Brisbane City Council or Sutherland Shire Council, for example, those websites generally have information that will give access to where people within that city council or state government precincts can come and ask for help.
Right, okay. Yeah, because I know Ipswich Council has a tender writer. Ipswich
Council's got one as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? I'd lean on them. That's why they're there. They're there to help local businesses, connect with government, in a better capacity. So, your tax dollars go, you pay for them, and often they're happy to. I generally find that they'll either talk to you one-on-one, but more often I see that they have tender writing days, for example, where they'll ask a group from the local community to come on out. But you just need to be aware of where they are. But they're definitely available, Anthony.
Right.
But just thinking about that, like if they're associated with the organisation, is there a benefit in using their services? No, because they've actually helped you write the process, or not?
Yes, absolutely. It depends on how good you are at writing a document. Some of them, for example, at a federal level and at a state level, I made you aware that we've helped people jump into the Ignite Ideas program. Gone are the days where they'll let you go down a path of spending hundreds and hundreds of hours to not be successful. Often they'll ask you to submit an expression of interest. An expression of interest is just a lighter, 5-page, 4-page application that gives them the opportunity to understand what you want to do before you invest hundreds of hours in writing an application. But they also act as your advocate too. So for some of the larger grants, whether you use a grant advisor or not, they allocate you a project manager. And the ambition there is to make sure that you have the best chance of success in securing these competitive funding. Now, your project manager within government will only be your advocate, but certainly, thank you, Deb. See you later. Nice to see you again. They will only act as your advocate. They still then would put you forward to the board. But definitely all of those services are available, and my suggestion is just jump in on them. Did I see a hand in the air by Jenny? Hi, Jenny. Sorry to ignore you, mate. I didn't quite see it, or is she gone already? Anyhow, were there any other questions, guys?
Jenny's popped it into chat here, Matt. She's just asking, what are the reporting requirements like for grants? Are you finding people are successful on the first application?
Depend on the program, depending on the grant, to be honest with you. So we've already had the discussion around, that small business boost grant. A lot of people didn't get the opportunity to be successful or not because it opened and closed in such a fast fashion that they were sort of deemed out of it. But I think mostly if you fit reasonably close to the key areas that they want to fund, because invariably they've got certain industries that want to promote. So if you fit closely within one of those, if you address the merit criteria, and think of it as a business case, guys. Like sometimes I've seen applications and you can tell that this part's written by the marketing department. I was at a conference on the weekend and someone referred to them quite unfairly as the colouring in department. But anyway, this part was written by the marketing department. And then of course you've got the technical area was written by a bunch of techos. And then the accountant threw their little bit into it, and it just read really piecemeal. It was warm and fuzzy, and then it was really, really dry and technical, and then it spoke about the numbers. So invariably, everybody in the organisation, or some people from an organisation, will be required to write certain sections of an application. My comment would be then sit back a little bit, because then you don't get the sales guy in, because the sales guy has probably overtalked the tech, and then the tech guy probably feels that it's never going to get off the ground because it's not perfect. Peter, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Matt, in America, there's a, I don't know if it falls under the category of grant, but there's a process where basically the small business section of the federal government will be the underwriter on a loan to do acquisitions. Yep. Is there anything like that in Australia that's on the... Yeah,
there is. Absolutely there is. And from time to time, different state government and the federal government change their focus. But at the moment, the federal government have a program called EFIC, E-F-I-C, and EFIC stands for Export Finance Investment Commission. And ultimately what they do...
You got muted.
There you go. Muted by host is what it said. A bit of payback there. But what EFIC stands for is Export Finance Investment Commission. They will help underwrite a normal bank loan. I think they're financed by Commonwealth Bank Australia. And ultimately, the CBA will have a different risk appetite than EFIC will. So, for example, you might need to import $200,000 worth of raw materials in order to service a $500,000 export project. and why EFIC come on board is they understand that borrowing money to finance $200,000 worth of raw material is possibly high risk to them. So EFIC will come in and underwrite it. So that's one that the federal government currently have to promote exporting in Australia. The Queensland government some years ago had and it was sort of funded by Queensland Invest, or QIC, which is a investment corporation, part of the Queensland government, that funded projects that had a particular affiliation with trying to bring up the, or trying to promote business with Australia and China. So different government, different state and federal government will have funding available. I'm only talking about government grants tonight, but like EFIC, they do want to support Australian businesses. And then even, and I didn't even mention it, but you know, the Gold Coast, I don't know how many of you reside on the Gold Coast, but even the Gold Coast City Council, you know, unbeknownst to us, they have business attraction grants. I don't know if any of you have driven down the M1 through Yatala and seen the big Caterpillar brand new sort of building on the right hand side. So that organisation was provided with a $2 million rent reduction support for Caterpillar to be hosted on the Gold Coast. Now, a lot of us grants writers were up in arms about that, because I certainly know thriving manufacturers on the Gold Coast that are expanding, that are putting people through apprenticeships, that are putting on, you know, building a dedicated spray booth facilities or advanced manufacturing. And I said to the Gold Coast City Council, why can't they also get access to this funding? And the comment that was made was because they're not newly attracted or coming to the Gold Coast. And this grant in particular is only about trying to promote businesses coming to the Gold Coast. And I thought, well, gee, Caterpillar aren't putting any apprentices on, are they? Maybe you know, they're importing yellow goods. But anyway, I just wanted to anecdotally talk about how city councils have a whole heap of grants and a whole heap of incentives, whether they be rent incentives or employment incentives that might fall out of a grant, but they're certainly available. Yep. Hope that answered your question. I'll give you a little bit of information, Peter, but I'm happy once again to have a chat offline, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
There's another question in chat there, Matt, which is, do you have to have your taxes up to date for a better chance to get a grant?
Absolutely, you do. Yep, absolutely. So it'll be a minimum requirement to show financial statements. So, and once again, we're assuming that this is a business grant of reasonable size. So often, yes, often yes. Any other questions there, guys? How's that landscape looking, Mike Palmer, since you last got involved in grants? Probably much the same, I think. Political appetite, funding goes in certain areas, very, very driven by flavour of the day. Am I right?
Yes, I very much the same, Matt.
Yeah.
But I think that when government tries to change the direction of behaviour, they just issue a grant.
They're
for example,
driven.
the Olympics are coming up in Brisbane, and
yeah,
and I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, that they want to have more gold medals. So there's a grant for to develop elite athletes to increase our chances of gold medals in 32.
Yeah, and that happened throughout the or leading up to the leading up to the 2000 Olympics as well. So sporting grants and guys, these happen across our country, whether we like it or not. You know, government puts pockets of money available in subsidies or grants or attraction or what have you. You know, depending on, you know, the prevailing political policy of the day. My comment is try and be reasonably aware of them. Where does it become non-commercial to jump on them? Once again, you know, they're predicated on the fact that you're either based in a state that the grant is, you know, if it's a New South Wales grant, you know, you need to be in New South Wales, Queensland grant, for example. There's an expectation that the intellectual property is owned by you, you know, there's an expectation that the enduring benefit is going to come to you and then have spillover effects to the rest of the government and community. I've certainly seen businesses that might have some investment out of Singapore, for example, out of New Zealand, out of the States, where to make that deal work, they've moved the IP, they've moved their head office external to Australia. And people say, Matt, what do you think about that? And I sort of say, well, if that's what's commercially beneficial, do what's commercially beneficial. You don't get into or jump onto a government grant program just for the purpose of receiving a grant. But if it commercially makes sense and you're doing these things anyway, jumping on board, I believe is beneficial. And more importantly, understanding how you might fit within a merit criteria, particularly if you're about to employ a whole heap of people, particularly if you're about to develop a new piece of technology, particularly if you're about to invest in infrastructure or modernisation of infrastructure and plant, particularly if you're about to export, particularly if you're servicing aged care, youth, Indigenous. You know, these are areas that government like to fund, and certainly, you know, if you're also spending money in that space, you know, they can be quite concessionary. Any other questions through the chat there, Nick, that I've missed, mate?
No, good here at the moment that we've sort of covered everything there. Oh, apart from one there asking, there are more sort of grants offered around election time.
Definitely. And then more so than that, you know, there's a little bit of pontificating at change of government as well. So, you know, I started by saying that the last round of export grant funding was paid out at 30%. Whilst it's a federal program that's been going for 30 odd years, I can't help but suspect the new current federal government will want to one up the last federal government, and I'll throw extra cash into that. So look, these are politically driven funding programs, make no mistake about that. So absolutely coming towards an election. Yeah.
What about, I mean, some of these are local government or are sort of regional government, state government grants. Local governments have a range of initiatives as well too, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. One that I've just spoken about is business attraction grants. If you're planning on moving from the Gold Coast to Moreton, I'd guarantee the Moreton Regional Council is likely to have a business attraction grant. Everybody wants good people, good businesses to come to them. But then even at a lower level, you know, there might be benevolent arts, small business grants of $500, you know, $1,000, $2,000 available. It just sort of pays to do your research. Whilst it wouldn't make sense to get a grant writer involved, as my comment was to, was it you, Fred? The government grant pages, or Anthony, my apologies, government grant, sorry, local council and state government websites these days are pretty good, and they'll give some assistance and there'll be some support available for tenders and small grant programs. I think I could be done. Nick?
Well, lots of information in there. Any other questions or comments there for Matt before we wrap up his segment here?
You know, I reckon, like, it was a great segment and it certainly got my thought patterns running, you know, so I'm thinking about what I could do and everything else, and I'll definitely be catching up, Matt, and great presentation, dude. Thanks, mate.
You're welcome. And guys, I'm a pretty frank sort of a fella, so you're welcome, of course, to reach out. I'm not going to lead you down a dry gully or a garden path if there's no opportunity, because that just wastes both of our times. But I'm certainly happy to, and I should also say, as I've tried to convey, availability of funding is only a matter of time, based on government budget. So what is topical and favourable today may not be next budget. But I'm happy to have a chat and give you a pretty candid comment as to whether or not I think what you're doing is in the zone, or at the same time too, you know, help direct you to a local or state or federal government website, and you can go and jump on and do your own research as well.
Excellent, excellent. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, man?
Would you like me to put my email address into the chat? Is that the best way for that to happen?
You might definitely do that. Your email address and maybe your website as well too.
Sure.
Excellent. While Matt's doing that, if you've enjoyed tonight's presentation, it will be available on the YouTube channel tomorrow, the Smash Go YouTube channel. So if you want to catch up on it, or you missed anything out of tonight, you can certainly go there and watch the replay tomorrow. It'll be up there tomorrow afternoon, so we'll normally get up there by the afternoon. We'll drop the link into chat as well too, so that there it is, it's in chat now. So if you jump onto that, subscribe to the Smash Go YouTube channel. Once you've subscribed to it, there's a little bell that appears beside the subscribe button. If you click that, that will then give you a notification as soon as that video is up and ready to view. All right, so now at this point, you're happy for anyone to have a chat with you at any time, or to make some sort of time to have a chat with you, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Be patient, guys. I've had a week in Sydney at a boring old accountants convention last week, so I'm still playing catch up. So if you email me, I definitely will be back in touch with you. If I'm a day or so tardy, you know, I'm still catching up, but happy to have a chat. Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much, Matt, for coming along and sharing your information along tonight. So certainly a lot of interesting stuff to take away. And I, like Fred, was really interested in some of that digital exports. So,
very good. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think anyone that does have, you know, either products in development or even the trade show expos, I thought that was quite good as well too. So there's lots and lots of opportunity in there, and well worth sort of you know, looking at the areas of your business that you're involved in, just to see what sort of assistance and help is available, whether that be a tax incentive or, you know, a rebate, you know, at the end of the year, or whether there are specific grants that you can look at and go for too. And there are plenty of others that will help, and certainly, you know, people like Matt are good people to go for to get that assistance and to get some advice around it all. So yeah, thanks again, Matt. Let's give Matt a big virtual applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Excellent. As I say, this will be up on YouTube tomorrow, the Smash Go YouTube channel tomorrow. Just one other thing too, we do have a masterclass happening next Wednesday. So leading on from the workshop that we had, or it was a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday now, one-day workshop, had expressions of interest for people that are looking at ways there to generate leads and more customers on an automated basis, so that they're not having to pay for ads necessarily. So if you're looking for organic strategies to you know, generate new leads, new customers, new business, then the masterclass next Wednesday is will be for you. I've dropped a link into chat there. It's on Eventbrite, and is if you want to register to come along for that. It will be online. It'll be on Zoom, 8 in the morning through to midday. So it's a half-day workshop in the morning, and all about you know, sort of systems to get your lead generation up and running. If you are running ads, then this will help to really amplify what you're doing with ads. But if you're not running ads, or you're spending too much on ads and getting a return, then this workshop's all about helping you to set your digital properties, your website, and up there to ensure that you are capturing some of those leads and getting them into your system and into your workflow. So
yeah, so link there is in chat if you're interested in that. Apart from that, thanks again, Matt, for coming along and sharing your wisdom with us tonight. Thanks everyone for coming along and supporting us, and hopefully there's some good takeaways for you tonight. If you've got any questions at all, feel free to ask any questions either of Matt through his email there, or you can sort of shoot it through in the Business Owners Smashing Online Facebook group, or shoot me a message, and happy to answer it or pass it on to Matt as well too. All right, so again, this Business Owners Smashing Online, it happens every Tuesday at this time. I've dropped a link to chat there for you to register for the next one. Otherwise, go and have a sensational week, and look forward to seeing you all again online somewhere, somehow. Thanks again for coming along tonight.